The VO Meter, measuring your voiceover progress. Whether you're a veteran voice actor, just starting out, or don't even know how to set a level, we're here to help you avoid the pitfalls along your voiceover path to success. The VO Meter is brought to you by Global Voice Acting Academy, JMC Demos, Studio Bricks, Voice Actor Websites, and Roswell Pro Audio. The VO Meter is produced in part using Source Connect made by source-elements.com. And now your hosts, Paul Stefano and Sean Daly.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 108 of the VO Meter.
Measuring your voiceover progress.
Our guest today is Matthew McGlynn of Roswell Pro Audio. A few months ago, he sent us some review units of his very popular Mini K87, which is about a $400 mic, but punches well above its weight. But we'll be talking about that more in a little bit. But first, it's time for our VO Meter reference levels.
VoiceOver Extra brings you the VO Meter reference levels. Seriously, guys, that's the best you could come up with? Hey, it's your show.
Yeah, and speaking of Roswell and Matt McGlynn, we have a big announcement to make. I teased it a couple of weeks ago on social media and then told everybody they have to listen to figure it out. So here you go. Here's your big announcement. Roswell Pro Audio, as you may have heard in the introduction by now, by the way, voiced by Sean's fiance. Fantastic job by Rachel. Roswell is a new sponsor of the VO Meter. So welcome, Roswell Pro Audio.
Woohoo! Yay, more free stuff. No, not exactly. But honestly, we're really happy that Roswell has joined our roster of sponsors because, as you guys know, we are unabashed gear lovers on this podcast. And if we can sample good quality gear that we are proud of and happy to do so, well, we're happy to do that. So really happy to have you on the team, Matt. Thanks for being a sponsor.
And once again, let's talk about that intro. Fantastic job. You have any comments?
Well, some of you guys know I've been sort of pulling Rachel into the VO sphere a little bit. I mean, we both love doing voices. We both come from theater, but she sees and recognizes all the other, the gear and the marketing stuff and in the gig economy, which she's not a fan of, but she's very talented. So whenever I can, I try to collaborate with her on either our Masters of the Mini comic stuff, or now we are trying our hands at a more commercial conversational read. So she listened to our previous talent to get a sense of the cadence and the style, and within a few within a few takes, she had something that we all really liked. So thanks, honey. Love you.
Yeah, and if our previous announcer, Heather, is listening, no offense, but we needed something new because the new sponsorship, and we figured why not? The talent was in-house, literally in this case. So we were able to get it done pretty quickly, and Rachel did a great job.
We're sorry, we can't afford you anymore, Heather. No.
That probably is true, honestly.
I know. I hope she's doing well. I'm sure she is.
So other than the new intro, what else is going on in your VO world?
Well, lots of new stuff, actually. Let's see. So first off, with Global Voice Acting Academy stuff, we are inching towards our new website and even a new service that I'm really happy to talk about, which is GVAA On Demand. So for those of you who want to take advantage of some of the the workshops and the webinars that we do, but don't necessarily want to have a membership with that and with some of the in-person workouts and stuff, we're now providing a digital library service called GVA On Demand. So it's going to be really affordable, and you'll learn more details later, but really excited about that. We're also getting a new website to accompany that. It's going to be mobile friendly on all devices. Super stoked about that. And a lot of these things are going to be revealed at our appearance at One Voice Conference, which is coming up in about 2 months.
Oh, so, you're going to that? Ugh.
Yep, not just me. All of GVA is.
Well, the rest of them will be fine.
What's that? Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of them. No, just kidding.
Wait, you're there? I didn't know that. Why aren't we doing a thing? But
well, yeah,
anyways.
I'm a presenter there this year.
Gotcha. So yeah, so
sorry,
I'll
continue.
be there. Thank you. So I'll be there. David Rosenthal and David Toback will be there, as well as Christina Malizia, which is nuts because we haven't been all together in 7 years. So that'll be a fun little reunion for us. So that's pretty much everything on the GVA front. Do you want to talk for a minute? Because I got more personal things too.
Sure. Well, just on the One Voice Conference, it will probably happen before we get another episode out. So I am presenting there. I'm talking about live sports announcing. and we're going to have a general talk, as they say, or a breakout about how to get into live sports announcing, what it is, how to find work, and do some live reading if anyone's interested. So please come see me if you want to come to my breakout on live sports announcing.
Very cool. Well, I know you've got a lot of experience and expertise in that area, and I feel like it's a great place for people to kind of network locally and find more local regional opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about that as well. And then on that front, another news item is I did my first Major League Baseball game in between our last episode and this. Thank you. Yeah, that was really, really exciting. I'd been trying for a long time to get into a major sports franchise in America. There's really 4 or 5, depending on your fandom. There's the NFL, National Football League, the NHL, National Hockey League, the NBA, the National Basketball Association, and Major League Baseball, which is MLB. Some people would argue the MLS is in there too, Major League Soccer. I tend to like soccer as well. But generally the big 4 are basketball, hockey, basketball, hockey, baseball, and football. And I was really hoping to get into one of those big franchises, and I finally did. So I got the call to the show, as they say in baseball. That's what they say when a player gets drafted and moved up to Major League Baseball. And I announced the Washington Nationals versus the Minnesota Twins at Nationals Park in Washington, D.C. Just one game so far, but it was really cool. There was like 16,000 fans there. My wife and kids all came and heard Dad on the mic, so it was really a good time and absolutely exhilarating.
Very cool. Well, congrats on the career milestone, buddy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I have a few more things as well that I wanted to talk about, but why don't you
sure.
We'll go back to you for a second and alternate.
Yeah, sounds good. Professional development stuff. Let's see. So for fun, this last weekend, I went to a little smaller con event called Washington Summer Con. For those who don't know, we have a big one in Seattle called Emerald City Comic Con, and this one's at the Puyallup County Fairgrounds, so it's a little bit more accessible. But there were dozens of voice acting guests there. There was James Arnold Taylor. There was D. Bradley Baker.
Really?
There was there was the Justice League cast from the '90s, the Justice League Unlimited show, like the Bruce Timm universe. So like Phil LaMarr, Susan Eisenberg. Let's see, George Newbern as Superman, Michael Rosenbaum. Like, there were so many guests, and I did not have the unlimited time and funds to meet them all and get signatures, but I did finally fill out my Justice League print with everyone but Carl Lumley. So he voiced Martian Manhunter back in the Bruce Timm Justice League universe. Fantastic job, but I don't think he does cons. Anyways, so that was fun going to that, and I actually got to meet Butch Hartman, who created Fairly Odd Parents, Johnny Bravo, and now recently The Garden cartoon with James Arnold Taylor and my friend Christina Milizia. So I don't normally do this, but I kind of went over there and was just like, hi, I just want to say hello. I'm a friend with one of your actors. He's like, oh, really? Let's get a picture and send it to her. And so he was incredibly friendly, very gracious, was excited to hear I was friends with Christina and working on my own animation demo. So happy about that. But anyways, so enough fandom news. Some kind of professional development stuff. I'm actually doing an ADR session with our previous guest, Fanny Raybow, tomorrow. So
nice.
If you're listening, Fanny, I'm really looking forward to our session. Some professional milestones for me. So a couple things. I'm an audiobook narrator now, apparently. You guys have heard me talk in the past, or it's just like I've struggled with audiobook narration because of the production aspects of it. But moving back a few months ago, I was reaching out to a couple of local studios in Bellingham because I was trying to solicit an agent in Seattle. And they're like, all right, find the 3 nearest studios and let us know what their tech abilities are in case we need to do a remote session with Source Connect or something similar. And so I did, and then Bob Ridgely at the studio called Binary Recording in Bellingham, who I worked with before, was like, oh, hey, you're back in town. Do you do audiobooks? I was like, yeah, I have in the past. And he's like, why don't you audition for me? I've got a book that needs to be done right now. I was like, okay. And so I did. We got the book, and then I went to his studio, and we were working on it like 4 or 5 hours a day for like 2 weeks and just cranked it out. And he's like, oh, that was great. I got another one for you. I was like, okay. And so we worked on that one. It was even bigger, and we spent like 23 recording hours on it and knocked that one out. And he's like, all right, I've got 2 more for you. I was like, okay, this is happening, I guess. So if you look back, I think I even said, I was like, I don't think I can do audiobooks unless I'm working with an engineer. Well, I found one who's willing to work with me, so
you're
I'm
just
doing
reading.
audiobooks now.
You're just reading, and he's doing all the engineering.
Yup.
Yeah, that's the sauce, man. If you can get that gig, that's cool.
I've got a golden ticket. But so really enjoying that. I've been doing some interesting books, some political, some like ancient history, ancient aliens type stuff. Now we're working on one about the medicinal qualities of hallucinogens before dying. So so some really interesting stuff. Two quick more announcements. One, I got an agent commercial booking. Woohoo!
Nice.
And
Congrats.
well, thank you. And not only that, but they liked the audition so much that they're using it for the final. So that was a little milestone for me. And then one last weird thing that's happened. I was auditioning for a commercial for another client, and they got it, or like I sent it to them. I sent them like another pickup because there was a foreign word that I got wrong, and so I was correcting that. And they're like, the client thinks this is AI generated. Can you send us a video of you doing this so we can prove that you're a human? And I was just like, come on. And so, of course, this happens when I'm gone, when I'm visiting my parents. So this was like 4 days of back and forth where it's like, I don't really believe in this stuff. Are you sure you need me to do this? Like, yeah, we're sure we need you to do this. And so by the time I made the video and I sent it off, it was like, you know what? I don't care if you're going to use this or not. I demand the fee that we agreed on for this job because it took me so much time to do this little commercial that we could have finished days ago, right? So anyways, and then a lot of people who I've talked with online have been like, yeah, that could be even worse. Maybe they're trying to deep fake your face or something like that. So it's like I didn't really have like a face-on view of the camera or anything. It was just like me talking into the mic at a weird 45-degree angle. So try and deep fake that. But anyways, so it's a weird time we're living in. You know, it's like I feel like some clients are I feel like their heart's in the right place, but this seems really misguided, you know, and like if I can fake my audio, why can't I fake my video? And it's just like, I don't know. This is weird Minority Report days, everybody.
Are you able to share where that came from?
Yes, it's a studio called Sound Deals.
Oh, it's from a studio. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because the reason I bring it up is because I've had this happen on Fiverr, where people have accused me of recording with an AI voice, and I think it's an effort for them to try and get the audio for free because they leave a bad review and they say, well, it was AI generated, therefore we can't use it, and they're looking for you basically to cancel the order, but then they're going to keep the audio and reuse it. So be aware of that. There's some unscrupulous people out there that are definitely trying to do that, not just on Fiverr, but just in the internet wild. They're trying to get you to send them the audio and then complain. It's like a bad eBay transaction. So this happens a lot if you sell any gear on eBay or anything on Facebook Marketplace. Someone will complain and say, well, you didn't mention that there was a scratch on the backside of that phone you sold me. Therefore, I want a rebate. And it's just a way to save money or get things for free. And it's the same thing happens with voice hiring, I think.
I see. Well, that's good to be aware of. Well, whether they say yes or no, they're getting an invoice. So
yeah. So,
right,
by the way, this studio recording with an engineer, I've been offering this to people for years. If it's something you still want to do, we can do it remotely. It's what I do basically all day, every day is for Twin Flame Studios, is record people at Booth Direct. It's just I do it remotely. So if you have any more books you want to audition for but don't want to do any of the back-end work, the production, let me know. We could partner together.
Sweet. Nice. I think I reached out to you about that a few years ago, but you were too busy at the time. But I think I would love to take advantage of that now.
Awesome. So congratulations. It sounds like you have a lot going on.
This was a busy month, man. But enough about me. How are you doing?
I have a couple more things going on. I just wrapped an audiobook yesterday called Terrorist Trail. I picked up on ACX for above union rates, which is pretty cool. And interestingly, I hired my daughter to edit it for me. So I think I mentioned my daughter has been going to acting school at the Boston Conservatory and is back for the summer after her freshman year. And she had taken some production courses as part of her curriculum. And she learned basically how to edit audio. So I said, well, you want a job doing it for the summer, at least for me? So she said yes. And we both finished the book yesterday and submitted it to the author and rights holder on ACX, and hopefully it gets approved. So I'm paying her the editing portion that I would have paid somebody else normally. And she did a great job, so that was cool.
Nice.
And then, funny story about the same said daughter. So we share an agent. I think you're there too. Are you still with Tag?
Yep.
Yeah. So
That was actually who I booked the commercial with. So.
oh, great. So more rub my face even more. So you like this story?
Oh,
so
no.
we had an audition. Jimmy from Tag sends me auditions for everybody, all 3 kids and me. And if it's something that fits the kids, we'll audition for it. So there was this PSA, and I sent it to Anna, and we recorded it. I was still engineering for her, and I was listening, and I said, "Ooh, she's good. Like, she must actually be learning something at college. Imagine that. The acting classes actually help you get better at acting." So before, she was just kind of getting by on being cute and a little girl. Same with the boys. They just had cute voices, and they would book these little kid roles. But now she's actually learned how to act. And I sent it to Jimmy and said, "By the way, this is the first thing she's done since she finished her first year of college. I'd love to know your thoughts." So like 10 minutes later, I get a phone call, and this is like 10 o'clock at night on a Friday. I'm already like 3 bourbons in, and
Nice.
he's
choice,
like,
by the way.
"Hey, Paul, how you doing?" Jimmy's got a Texas accent, and I said,
Not too bad. No.
"Fine, Jimmy. How are you?" He says, "Great. Is Anna there?" Anna's my daughter. And I was like, "Yeah. Why?" And he wanted to talk to her about the audition. So he gets her on the phone, and I hear secondhand because she starts talking to him herself. He starts giving her notes on how to do the audition with a different take. So we jump back in the studio, send it off. Next day he calls again. "Paul, it's Jimmy. Can I talk to Anna?" So give him the phone. She booked the damn gig. So Jimmy hasn't called me for a gig ever to do direct notes. I mean, not at least over the phone. So Anna, after 1 year of acting classes, has done the equivalent of what I've done with Tag in like 6 years. So nice job, Anna and Jimmy. Thanks so much for.
Well, if it makes you feel
booking
better,
with-
Jimmy was
with Anna.
like, congrats to your daughter. But if it makes you feel better, Jimmy was like, well, Sean, after all the years we've been together, you finally booked one. Congrats.
Oh, that's great. But yeah, it was.
Yeah, as you can tell, commercial is not our strong suit.
It's just hard though, man. I mean, you know how it is. It's hard to book anything anywhere, and it's even harder in the last 6 months. So that was a nice surprise that Anna was able to book that gig. So here's to many more. I do have one more thing to talk about. I tackled, I think, my last untapped genre. I did an audio description job a few weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was
Cool.
through a production house that sends me e-learning fairly regularly. And they contacted me and said, would you like to do an audio description? And I said, sure. So it was probably the simplest job I've done in years. They sent me the video, the animatic that had the graphics behind it, and a script. And it was like 3 minutes long. And I read the lines once, sent it to them, and they paid me. That was it. But it was really interesting because the first time I tried to tackle that genre, and I think my voice might fit it pretty well because it was very similar to the voice I've used for meditation or calming exercises for a book and a couple of apps I've done. So it's very low-key, just describing the action that's going on, and you'll probably find this out tomorrow when you work with Fanny. But it was really, at least the first pass was easy for me to do on this particular job. They won't all be that easy, I'm sure, but I sort of slipped into it really easily and got paid next day. So that was really fun. So that pretty much wraps up all the current events I have going on. We'll get to our interview with Matt McGlynn from Roswell right after.
Questionable gear purchase.
So I have an upcoming questionable gear purchase that I have to talk about. Do you have anything before we get going on my side of things?
No, not this month.
Okay,
Surprise.
so I finally have reached the end of life of my computer, I think. So we talked about how I run a very old Mac at this point. It's a Mac Mini from 2012, and I finally got the warning from Chrome today, actually yesterday, saying, warning, Will Robinson, you can't update your Chrome anymore because you're running an old OS. I'm still on Mac OS Catalina because that's where this particular computer maxes out. So I got to bite the bullet and either buy a computer or maybe borrow one pretty soon because I don't want to have any security issues with Chrome. And then it's going to start cascading quickly where everything gets out of support. So what are your thoughts on buying a new computer?
Well, I mean, you're kind of spoiled for choice, to be honest. So if you just wanted to update the Mini, that's only a couple $100 and can get an M2 Mini, and that would probably last you for another 7 years. So if you want an all-in-one,
Wait, you
could
update the
get-
Mini. You mean buy a new Mini?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So buy a new Mini, or I mean, if you wanted like an all-in-one solution, you could honestly get a MacBook Air now, and then run your business off of that, and then you can either leave it hooked in for a desktop experience, or just take it with you for portable.
Yeah, I was
So-
wondering about that. Do you have any experience with using a laptop as a studio computer? Because here's the thing. Back to Anna for a second. She bought a 2019 MacBook Pro right before she went to college, refurbished one, and the screen has glitched out, which I'm now reading is a common thing with that particular year of computers.
Yeah.
So it's got a bunch of horizontal lines going across the entire screen.
Oh no.
And I don't think it's fixable without replacing the whole stupid display. So we bought her a new one in the meantime, MacBook Air, to go back in the fall. But I'm wondering if I could use that on a dock and just plug into a monitor.
Yeah, definitely. When I was moving up to Bellingham, I pretty much lived off of my laptop for like 8 months because I was just traveling back and forth between like my parents' house and Rachel's house and this one. But yeah, I ran my entire business off it for almost a year. Any of the M1 machines and up are going to last you very well. They're incredibly fast. They're very quiet. And now the current MacBook Airs, one of the reasons I wouldn't have recommended it is because it only had single monitor support. But now, as long as you close it in clamshell mode, you can use 2 monitors. So you could still have your current setup with one at the desk and one in the booth.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm planning on doing because I don't really need to ever open it. I just need to stash it away in the corner, kind of like the Mac Mini, just closed.
Yeah, so it really depends. I mean, so like you could spend $500 or $600 for the Mini, or you could spend a little bit more, maybe like up to $1,000 for an Air, and then have similar functionality and then portable. So it's
What about
really
the ports? Because I've heard of issues, especially with external gear plugged into it, that some of the ports are not powerful enough to power certain things.
interesting.
We
'Cause
found
when
it
you only got
mostly with USB mics. When working with Twin Flame Studios, we had a couple of clients that we figured out these dongles they were using were not able to draw enough energy from the motherboard for a lot of the USB mics they would recommend.
Oh, okay. Well, ideally, you'd have something USB-C that you can plug direct or an adapter and stuff like that. But I used the Apogee mic without any issues, and that was
Okay.
plugged direct and into a dongle. And then the other one was the Rode Video Mic NTG. That one had no problems, both
Okay.
through USB-A, through a dock, and through direct.
I think the one that we ran into problems mostly was the Shure MV7. Maybe it's because it has all this onboard
okay.
processing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And isn't it more of a dynamic mic, so it might
It
need
is,
more
yeah.
current?
Probably needs more current, and it has this onboard processing. This what's the term for that?
DSP.
DSP. Thank you. Digital signal processing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, live. So that probably sucks a lot of energy too. Maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, interesting. And if you're looking for docks, I can highly recommend the ones from Anker, Anker,
Oh, yeah.
for kind of affordable ones. They have like a little 2-pronged adapter that just plugs into the side. That's like $80. And then I'm a big fan of OWC, or Otherworld Computing,
Yeah, I'm familiar with
also
them.
known as MacSales.com. They have used Macs. They have SSDs and all sorts of things that you can upgrade your Mac if you have an older one. And of course, they have like all sorts of dongles and docks that work with these as well. And I forget which one I have. I think it's like just called a travel dock. It's got like HDMI. It's got a couple USB-As. It's got an additional USB-C port. And it's like, and the thing is like even if you have something like say a MacBook Pro or a Mac Mini, you're going to run out of ports. So it can be useful to have one of these dongles or docks anyways. So yeah, again, recommending Anker, OWC, CalDigit has a great dock as well, but it's like $300 and it kind of lives on the desk if that's the experience you want.
Yeah.
So there's lots of options, but if you're trying to do a little bit cheaper, stick to OWC and Anker.
Yeah, I've definitely bought stuff from OWC before. In fact, I might have bought this old-ass Mac I have from there. That's why it was so cheap. So then one more thing, if I could pick your brain. God, I hate that phrase. If I could ask you another question from your carbon-based knowledge base.
Squelch. But
Hard drives. So my plan was to maybe clone my hard drive now and move it to the new computer. Have you ever done that, or do you think it's a better idea to start fresh and try and put all the software back on it. Because my concern is a lot of the logins and iLocks I have on this computer are going to be a mess to try and get to a new computer.
Gotcha. So usually I just do a full migration whenever I get a new machine. And then, I know it's not the best practice, but anything that doesn't work after the fact, I just uninstall or reinstall and all that stuff. But I kind of, maybe it's just my hoarder brain, but it's just like I'd rather have a complete copy that I can play with and subtract from than rebuild everything piecemeal.
So you are like are you cloning or using Time Machine to take the old drive onto the new one?
Yeah, so usually I will just plug USB-C to USB-C, old machine to new, and then do a migration or have a migration on a backup drive and then do it that way. So
got it. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. All right, so lots to think about. I didn't want to have to cross this bridge now, but it's probably a good time now. It's the middle of summer, and it is a bit of a downtime, although I have a couple of jobs to do this week. But we'll see how that works out.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you have more questions, happy to bounce them off you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, that wraps up our questionable gear purchases. Let's talk about some sensible gear purchases with this month's guest, Matt McGlynn, right after these messages.
Walgreens, because it's flu season, and you live in a place with doorknobs and handrails and, people.
We tried booking a vacation rental on one of those other websites. They don't always tell you everything.
The stars take it to the red carpet.
We are back live from the red carpet.
California leads the way for change in America, and so does Kamala Harris.
Rated M for mature. Claire Redfield.
And who exactly are you?
So, yeah, what hashtag should I use to describe a grown man in a tuxedo wrestling a goat?
And prior to 1933, many of them belonged to a variety of political parties that were now outlawed in Germany.
This is the story of how Q got curly. Quinn was crazy about curls. Curly fries, curly straws, curly-haired dogs.
Hey, Jay Michael here. Thanks for listening to the VO Meter podcast. It's one of my favorites. If you're looking for a great demo like the ones you just heard, check out jmcdemos.com for more information.
Studio Bricks designs and creates the highest performing portable sound isolation booths. Their professionally perfected acoustics enhances your performance and takes your recording to their maximum quality from your home studio. Forget about managing noise conflicts with your neighbors and family. Pursue your passion for voiceover on your own time and on your own terms.
In these modern times, every business needs a website. When you need a website for your voice acting business, there's only one place to go. Like the name says, voiceactorwebsites.com. Their experience in this niche webmaster market gives them the ability to quickly and easily get you from concept to live online in a much shorter time. When you contact voiceactorwebsites.com, their team of experts and designers really get to know you and what your needs are. They work with you to highlight what you do. Then they create an easily navigable website for your potential clients to get the big picture of who you are and how your voice is the one for them. Plus, VoiceActorWebsites.com has other great resources, like their practice script library and other resources to help your voiceover career flourish. Don't try it yourself. Go with the pros. VoiceActorWebsites.com, where your VO website shouldn't be a pain in the you-know-what.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the interview portion of this episode of the VO Meter. Our guest today is Matthew McGlynn, a self-described microphone nerd, so you know he's in good company. His first audio project was RecordingHacks.com, a website that attempted to describe every microphone ever made. It gave him an excuse to buy a lot of microphones, absolutely necessary for the research, so far as he told his very tolerant wife. Having way too many microphones gave him the opportunity to take them apart and make them sound better. He launched MicParts.com to sell microphone upgrade parts and kits, bringing joy and sonic self-actualization to DIY aficionados around the world. But because not every recording enthusiast also enjoys solder fumes, Matt founded Roswell Pro Audio, a microphone company whose products come already put together. Roswell microphones are best-in-class offerings that have earned acclaim from Grammy Award-winning artists, producers, and engineers. So, without further ado, please welcome our guest, Matthew McGlynn. How's it going, Matt?
It's going great. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So, as our listeners heard in the intro to this episode, we are now sponsored by Roswell Pro Audio, and we're so happy to have you here to talk about the company and how your products might benefit our listeners and people who are just fans of the show. So once again, thanks so much for coming on board as a sponsor, Roswell Pro Audio.
Happy to help. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
So as Sean said, you actually started with a couple of other websites, and I'm really curious about that because I found out that you had founded recordinghacks.com when you sent me the bio Sean just read. And I'd been using it for years to reference microphones and different specs. Even on the show, we've talked about it. When we've talked about other products in the past, we pulled up Recording Hacks and said, this is what Recording Hacks says. So tell us how that started and then how you transitioned to the other two companies to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a musician and I record at home and have been doing so for a very long time. First home recording solution was and this is a long time ago, so the memories are vague, but it was a 2-channel. It was a card that you plugged into your computer. What we take for granted now, the capabilities and the level of quality that is available now is frankly kind of mind-blowing. But I had this 2-channel card that plugged inside of a computer, and I don't know how I expected I was going to be able to record drums with just 2 microphones, because anyone who plays drums and records knows you need like 16 minimum to get a good sound out of a drum set. That's a little triggering for a lot of people. But I needed a lot of microphones, and I guess my brain tends to try to put things into categories, and I kept wanting someone to build a website that would tell me what my options were for recording the drums, and not just drums, but all kinds of things. Because if you think about it, if you can call a vendor, you can call a store, or go to a store that sells microphones, but they're only going to tell you about what they have, what they carry, which is probably current production stuff. But maybe what you need, meaning what's best for your particular application, isn't made anymore. I mean, maybe it was just discontinued, but it's like, it's exactly what you need. So I kept imagining that there would be a website that has this kind of database of microphone information, and the universe stubbornly refused to provide that for me. And I put off building it for a couple of years. And then it got to be where I'd be kind of looking around to see if it was out there, and then transitioning from hoping to find it so I could just look up what I wanted to know and then move on with my life, transitioning to being afraid that I would find it, because it got to be where I really wanted to build it. And I had a background in database design and technology and coding and so on. And so I felt like I was qualified to put something like that together. And that's where it came from. And I started by ingesting websites like Audio-Technica, I think was one of the first ones, and Biodynamic. And so I thought, well, I'll just import all of their product descriptions, and pretty quickly realized that, and not to name any names, and certainly not the 2 I just mentioned, but in a lot of cases, the product descriptions are like, this microphone is the best thing you've ever heard on every source you could possibly ever put it on. And it's just not true. And I understand why they say that. And some consumers are not deeply educated or as fanatic about it as some other people are. And, so for some of those people, it makes sense to say, yeah, you can use it on everything, because in a sense, it's maybe slightly true for common applications. But anyway, I realized that ingesting marketing people's descriptions of their products was not super useful. And so I started writing my own, and that made me realize how little I knew about it, right? What's the best way to learn something is to try to teach it to somebody else. So here's me trying to teach microphone technology to people. And so I needed to kind of go to school on that. And so I started contacting the companies and worming my way through the first and second tier of tech support people, and finally getting into the inboxes of people who actually were designing the mics. And actually going to trade shows was a big piece of that. So at trade shows, maybe that's a unique opportunity where a layperson can come up and end up talking to, a Dave Royer or a David Josephson, and ask the picky questions that some of those guys are uniquely qualified to answer. And then, so I did that for years, and then I just translated that to my audience. And, basically what I learned along the way of all of this, and this again goes back a very long time, is that the way microphones sound is ultimately a function of how they're designed. And so there's different microphone types, ribbons, condensers, dynamics, to name the 3 biggest categories. And then the way those transducers operate materially affects the sound that you get. So most ribbon mics have a figure of 8 polar pattern. Why? Well, because that's the way it was designed. It's a transducer kind of floating in space with nothing in front and nothing behind. condenser mics tend to have higher output. Why is that? Well, because it's got a very low mass transducer, and so it can respond to the most subtle of vibrations. Unlike, for example, a moving coil dynamic, like your SM57, SM58 stage vocal mics. Those things are basically like miniature speakers, kind of wired in reverse, not wired in reverse, but operating in reverse. Instead of vibrating due to input voltages and creating a sound wave, they're vibrating in response to a sound wave and then creating a voltage, right, in the other direction. So, but it's relatively high mass, and so they tend not to have really detailed high frequency response. So that's just a couple of examples. And I've actually, over the years, put together an hour-long kind of presentation masterclass about why microphones sound the way they do. That's available on YouTube and other platforms. But ultimately, the point of it all was that Recording Hacks was born out of my desire to understand what my options were. And then it's also kind of a record of my self-education in that. And it was, I suppose for me, it was inevitable, but there are people who in the world who like to make things, and I guess I'm one of them. It's kind of like a hot rodder mentality. It's not just about making things, it's about thinking very naively, well, maybe I can make this better. Like once I understand how it works, well, what if I did this? What if I changed that? And that's what microphone parts led to. Because as I'm researching for Recording Hacks, trying to understand what makes microphones tick, looking under the hood, so to speak, and I'm very much one of those people when I buy a new microphone, I don't plug it in. First thing I do is I open it because I want to see what's inside.
Also helps to make sure it's not counterfeit.
Yep. It's real bravery, though. My hands are too shaky for that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and there are things you shouldn't do. But in general, I always like to see what's inside. But in researching, how things work and spending a lot of time trying to understand that, I would come across people who would say, oh, I modified it. I did this. I changed this component. I changed that component. And that really started to, I was skeptical at first. Then I started trying it myself, and I thought, is it really possible that you can buy so in those days, the Musician's Friend website has a thing called the stupid deal of the day, where they'll take, something out of their inventory and they'll drop the price dramatically. And in those days, it was like a $49 MXL 990. That was kind of that came up every couple of months. And I thought, is it really possible to take this $49 microphone and then stick a different capsule in it, and it sounds not only completely different, but better? And the answer was, yeah, that's possible. And it's kind of mind-blowing. So you have to solder 3 wires, and then your total investment, and again, this is back in the day, so your total investment might be $150, but it sounds like you spent $500. That was a real thing, and that's where mic parts came from. It was an attempt to satisfy this desire on the part of a lot of people to build something cool on their own and to save a lot of money doing it and also have a hand in having built it. And that's, for a lot of people, that's really satisfying. So, and then mic parts evolved over time because we started by selling capsules. And then, in America, and this is not true in other countries, in America, one of the best brands for do-it-yourself upgrades of microphones is MXL, because those microphones are ubiquitous. They're everywhere, which means, and they're not expensive, at least, especially, 10 years ago, they were less expensive, but on the used market, they're even, lower cost, right? Because someone pays $100 for it, they sell it for 50, whatever. So they're readily available, they're inexpensive, and they were good building blocks. And so we were selling a lot of capsules to people who owned MXL microphones, and then MXL changed. Oh, and then we started introducing circuit mods, and this was a hard step up. I don't know if you guys watch Hot Ones, the chicken wings hot sauce interview show on YouTube.
Oh, I love that show. Absolutely, yeah.
But you know how? So if you haven't seen it, there's 10 wings of increasing degrees of heat, but also discomfort. And it's not linear, right? It's not like a little hotter. It's like it's fine, and then oh my God, like
exponential, yeah.
Yeah. And so the second set of products that Mic Parts introduced was kind of like that, because installing a new capsule was pretty easy. But the next product we had was basically a bag of components. We were expecting people to desolder things from the circuit board and then replace them and move wires around. And it was a little bit of a challenge. It was a lot more involved, yeah. I mean, the upgrade was still there. It was still a huge bang for the buck. But Then MXL, which again was our kind of primary target audience, was people who own these mics. MXL switched to surface mount circuit boards. And so I'm getting a little too technical, but just to sort of sum up, it was no longer feasible to do a component upgrade. So then we had to really step up our game, and we had to design our own custom circuit boards. And that actually, ironically, building a board from scratch is easier than modifying someone else's. So that was the evolution of mic parts. And then the next step of it was that, and mic parts took off like beyond any expectation. Like I really thought this was something where, this was like quote unquote beer money. We'd sell a couple things here and there, but there was a real hunger for this, a real market for this. And it dovetailed with recording hacks really nicely. So the audience that had discovered recording hacks was then discovering mic parts, and the two fed each other. And so mic parts really took off. And then our microphone kits started getting used by real people in real studios. Sorry, I don't mean to discriminate. Started being used by people who were making records that were getting airplay, and people who had awards and gold records, and so then that spread awareness again far beyond my expectations. And then we started getting requests from people to say, "Well, can you build this for me? I want the mic, but I can't. I'm not going to solder it together. It's just that's not my thing." And so that demonstrated to me something that I never expected to be true, which is that maybe there was a point in my life where I'd be competing with all the companies I'd spent a decade documenting for recording hacks. And that was a struggle. But that is where Roswell Pro Audio came from, was an attempt to answer this question, can you build it for me? And they're not the same. The mic parts mics are their own thing. And then we take some of the same ideas and sometimes some of the same components, and that's what the Roswell mics are. But they're really designed for a different audience, like namely someone who doesn't want to solder anything together. So, but in a nutshell, in a very large nutshell, that's that's the origin story.
Oh, that's awesome. As Paul said, he used recording hacks for a number of years. I did as well, especially when researching some of the more popular voiceover mics. And I'm curious, kind of a two-part question. Going from your research days with recording hacks, were there any particular mic models that surprised you? Say ones that were really popular, really ubiquitous, that didn't sound great, or ones that were really affordable, like the MXL 990 that surprised you?
Yes and no is the best answer to the question. And the thing about the MXL mics is that, the reason they were so popular is because they were really inexpensive, I think. I'm not an MXL insider. From my perspective, the reason the MXL mics were great is because they were readily available and affordable and easy to upgrade. And we, to this day, make upgrades for numerous MXL models, but we basically replace everything but the shell. So what you're buying is you could buy a dead mic on eBay, meaning plug it in and it doesn't work, right? No audio. That's fine, because really all we need from that is the grill and the body and the frame. We replace the capsule and the circuit and everything. But as far as voiceover, so my entry into this, I've kind of, not anymore. I used to want to be a voice actor. And
we're full.
Yeah, and that's okay, because I can't do it. I don't have the thing, and I think I could learn it. I think anyone can learn anything, but I've moved on. But because of that, I was when I was doing the recording hacks thing, I was really interested in voiceover, kind of as a side interest, and I started working with Jordan Reynolds, who at the time lived in Colorado, and he I think he worked in IT at the time, and was getting into voiceover on the side, and he was writing some content for me, and Jordan and I have always gotten along really great, kind of always had an easy rapport. And
same here, by the way. He's a good friend of both Sean and I.
Oh, great! Yeah, he gets around in a good way. But he's also easy to be around, and he's super knowledgeable and has an amazing voice too, and deserves every bit of the success that he's had. But in the earlier days of Roswell, I thought, well, let's make a voiceover mic, because I was treating Roswell very much as a hobby more than a business, and so I was free to sort of follow my whims. And frankly, that's still somewhat true. It's very much a business now. Fortunately, we've had enough success that I can kind of follow my whims, as opposed to trying to make something that bores me, but that I think people want to buy. But anyway, in the early days, we made a voiceover mic, and it was called the RAVO. And Jordan had a big hand in that, because basically I built 3 mics that I thought would be perfect for voiceover. And I sent them to Jordan, and he didn't like any of them. which was really interesting to me because what it meant was that I had completely misunderstood what the application is. Because I thought, okay, so it's a voice, so we want to enhance it. We want to throw all this stuff at it, some harmonics and some EQ and some seasoning, and the message I got back, and I don't know if this was Jordan who said it. I think it was, but the message was basically, no, the character comes from my mouth, not my gear, and that was mind blowing to me, which is why I've quoted it many times over the past 8 or 10 years. So what he ended up loving was the most neutral mic I could make. And in fact, it was neutral. It was actually a little thin too, right? Voiceover mics are typically used at a fairly close distance, right? 6 inches maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Any directional microphone, meaning anything that's not omnidirectional, so anything that's cardioid or especially figure eight, has something called proximity effect, which means as you get closer to it, the bass gets fuller and can sound muddy, depending. And so because the RAVO was intended to be used exclusively at a relatively close working distance, we actually baked a high pass filter into it, and it wasn't subtle. It was a little heavy handed, but it was flat above that. So like above 150 hertz, it was basically a ruler flat line, and it was transformerless. It was neutral, clean, no sauce at all, and that's the one that he loved, and that's what we ended up building as the RAVO, and we sold that for a couple of years, and then I realized I just didn't have the budget to market it effectively because the competition is basically Neumann, right? The TLM 103 was out at that time, and that was the go-to mic for a lot of people, and we just couldn't compete in terms of marketing. And so we stopped making it. That was kind of how I got interested in voiceover. And to circle back to your question, Sean, about like what I had discovered that was used or that worked well, it wasn't so much a matter of that I found anything else that worked well, because honestly, if I had, I probably wouldn't have made it. Like I've always kind of approached this like the thing that I want isn't out there. I've never had any interest in making a Me Too mic. Like, oh, I see, if I had that, I could sell 1,000 of them. Who cares? Like I'm really not interested in cloning someone else's thing. It's just the way I'm wired. So if I'd found an amazing voiceover mic, I never would have bothered making one of my own. What I found was that the mics that were very popular, I thought were terribly unsuited to the task. And the thing that gets me, and not everyone is as sensitive to this as some other people are, but the thing that gets me is that a lot of mics that are really popular for voiceover have a boost in the high frequencies. And it becomes really fatiguing to listen to. And this is something I wanted to share as a sort of tip for your audience. Like, for those of you who are shopping for a voiceover microphone, here's a test you should do before you decide that you found the mic that you think is the one. And that is to record yourself doing a script or whatever, whether it's a narration or a commercial thing or whatever. And then when you listen back to it, turn the volume really way down. And then listen to it and see if all you hear, all that's left when you've cut the volume way down, is the S sounds. So if those kind of, S sounds, if those stick out at really low volume, then chances are that microphone, either you need a de-esser or you need a different microphone, because that can create a very annoying, kind of harsh and difficult to listen to track for other people to listen to. And for me personally, that is kind of the kiss of death for voiceover mics. It's really difficult to tolerate that, because once you start hearing that really sharp S sound, I stop paying attention to whatever the content is. Like I can't hear the podcast or the explainer, whatever the infomercial. I can't hear the content, the presentation anymore, because I feel like I'm getting, an ice pick in the ear every time there's an S sound that comes by.
You need to email NPR about that. I agree, totally. That's extremely helpful. And it's like you're saying, both you and Jordan kind of discovered that we want transparency. We want neutrality with the mics that we have. Because I'm seeing daily on social media, just like, what's a great mic for a deep voice? What's a great mic for a raspy voice? I'm like, no, you want something that handles them all well. All the different characteristics, and just makes you sound like you without necessarily enhancing it. I love Jordan's idea of like controlling the input at the source rather than expecting the mic to enhance or like subtract from unwanted elements.
Yeah, and there's a general truism about microphones, and it's not just around voiceover, it's around every source in the studio, guitar and basically any other source. And the general truism is that neutrally voiced mics tend to complement a really wide range of sources. And by sources, I mean human voices. I mean types of delivery, from a spoken word to an infomercial to a narration to a commercial to guitars, big guitars, little guitars, acoustic guitars, electric guitars, bright guitars, deep, muddy guitars, whatever, right? So neutrally voiced mics tend to work with a really wide range of inputs. The more colored a microphone is, the more selective it is about what sources it's going to complement. So, and this, to your question or your example, Sean, about, deep voices or thin voices or whatever, it might be that those people will find a quote unquote colored mic that is perfect. Like it's the last jigsaw puzzle piece. It's the only one that exactly fits. That microphone might exist. You might have to hear 200 of them to find it. In the meantime, almost everyone could just get a neutral mic and get 95% of the way there. Yes, there might be something out there that's better, but a neutrally voiced mic will work. Like that will no longer be the thing that holds you back. So, and then to clarify neutral versus colored, I kind of went over this a minute ago, but neutrally voiced mics essentially have a more or less flat frequency response, which means they're not attempting to do EQ to your voice. And they tend to also not be adding any sort of richness or character or harmonics or saturation or anything like that. In general, a mic that does do some saturation, you can get away with that more likely. Sometimes that will limit you in terms of dynamic range, whereas a more colored mic in terms of its frequency response, like if you have something that's really bright, this is the example I gave, if you have something that's really bright, really crispy on top, that kind of microphone might be fine for drum overheads if you want a lot of cymbal detail. It might be great for that giant dreadnought acoustic guitar that has had the same strings on it since 1970. So you need something bright to try to, extract a little bit of articulation out of this very dead sounding instrument. Okay, so bright mics can have their place, in my opinion, a very limited number of places, but on voice, not so great. So any mic that's doing a bunch of EQ to your voice, and honestly, most mics do. Most mics do, whether intentionally or not. Inexpensive mics skew bright, and there's a historical reason for that. But yeah, so neutrally voiced mics tend to complement a wider range of voices, and so yeah, as you say, voice artists tend to prefer neutrality. Yeah, that's exactly right, because that gives you a lot of leeway. So if you're doing a narration today and it's kind of this very sedate, even read, this kind of mic will be fine. And then tomorrow you're doing something that's a little more shouty and commercial, that same kind of mic will be fine. Whereas a mic that has more of its own color, character, whatever, it might work fine in one context, but not another.
Well, let's talk about some of the current offerings Roswell has. Now we've gone over the history and the technology behind it, because as our listeners have heard, you were so kind as to provide me and Sean both with a Mini K87. I've been using it for about a month now as my only mic. I've used it for screaming video game auditions. I've used it for really quiet, close reads on storytelling. I've used it for live announcing reads in this booth, not out in the field, but I've used it for live announcing auditions, and it's handled everything like a champ. So I'm really impressed with this one. Let's talk about that and the other current offerings Roswell has.
Sure. So the good news for voice artists is that the Mini K87, that's the mic that you're using, it's the mic I'm using right now as well, that model is our best seller for voiceover. It's the one we recommend. And we have been working with a couple of voice artists, trainer and coach sort of people. And this is the model that they recommend as well to their students. The good news for voice actors and aspiring voice actors, this is our second least expensive model. So Roswell makes microphones from $389 up to $3,000, and the Mini K87 comes in at $439 currently. So yeah, we have three other models in what we call the Mini K product line. So it's a set of 4 mics, or 5 if you include our kick drum mic. But the other models they all sound different than the Mini K87. They all have different capsules. There's a totally different circuit design in two of them as well. And I'll mention them briefly, but I think voice artists are best served by the Mini K87. For those of you who also record music, some of the other models might be really interesting, and we actually have a thing on the website where you can do what's called a mixed pair, where you get a discount if you buy two different mics, and we ship them in a stereo case, so it's kind of a compact presentation. Doesn't take up a lot of space on the shelf, but you get two different, sonic colors in one box. That's the idea. So if you play guitar or, some other instrument, you could get two different mics and use both of them on your voice and or instrument and whatever. So the first mic we ever made was called the Mini K47. So the circuit is similar to what's in the Mini K87. The capsule is very different. That microphone has a boosted upper mid-range. And when I say upper mid-range, like 4K, it works well on some voices. On some other voices, it can be sibilant. So if people who have an issue with sibilance would likely want to stay away from mics that have a boost anywhere in that kind of 4 to 7K range. A lot of the Austrian audio mics have a boost in that range, and the Mini K47 does too, so there's nothing wrong with that. It's a very valid sound, and it's amazing on some sources, but for voiceover, hit and miss. We have a mic called the 47X, which still has a boost in that upper kind of 4 or 5K range. It's a little less than the Mini K47, so it's like a little more of what we'll call a vintage edition of the Mini K47. Meaning the 47X is this kind of vintage voicing. It also has a circuit with a giant output transformer in it, and so it creates some harmonics. That model is really great on a lot of sources in the studio. It can definitely work on voiceover. Again, it's a little more picky about what voices it works with, and I wouldn't recommend it as a first pick. If someone's just buying a mic, I'd say Mini K87 for voice. But, the people who have tried it like it. It's been recently winning some shootouts on like extreme metal vocals, which surprises me, but I've heard it and it was shocking how well it worked. But a lot of other studio sources, a lot of guitar cabs, things like that. And then we have a model called the Mini K67X. So someone who wanted a voiceover mic with a couple conditions. So given a couple conditions, I would recommend the K67X for voiceover. And that would be if someone has a sibilance issue, and someone who tends not to do louder deliveries. Okay, so if you do louder deliveries, the K67X might overload. And in that case, the Mini K87 would be preferred. If you have sibilance, the Mini K87 is usually fine because it doesn't do any boosts in its frequency response, right? It doesn't have any EQ built in. The K67X does have EQ built in, but it's subtractive. So it's a little darker, like in the 4, 5, 6, 7K range. There's a kind of a dip in the response curve of the K67X. So if you have sibilance in that kind of 5, 6, 7K, meaning 5, 6, 7 kilohertz range, the K67X model might work really well for you. But again, if some of your deliveries include shouting at the microphone, then I would stick with the Mini K87 after all, because the Mini K87 has a lot more headroom. And so if you're going to go from, the whisper to a scream sort of thing, the Mini K87 is the best choice.
Does the Mini K87 have a built-in high-pass filter? I wasn't able to figure that out.
It does not.
Okay.
No. So yeah, I mentioned the RAVO, which was the voiceover mic that we made with Jordan years ago. The Mini K87 is about 98% the same as the RAVO, which is kind of a feat of design because we made the mic better on a component level, like lower noise and some other upgrades, but we cut the price in half.
And the size too, right?
Say it again?
Wasn't the RAVO much bigger? To me, I never saw one in person, but in the pictures and videos with Jordan did, it kind of looked like the butt end of a lightsaber in Star Wars.
It's slightly larger than what you're using right now, Paul.
Yeah, it was a little taller.
Right.
I don't think it was any bigger in diameter. It was slightly longer. But and it did have some really high dollar accessories. It had a special shock mount, although we have since developed a shock mount that's actually superior and we don't charge nearly as much for it. And then it came with an SKB case, which was a beautiful case, quite expensive and not really needed if the mic's going to live in your booth anyway.
Yeah.
But the RAVO retailed for $9.99, and that was 8 years ago. So inflation being what it is, that'd probably be $1,200 today.
That's what the current prices for places that still have it is, about $1,200 or $1,300.
I can't imagine too many places have it because we didn't make that many of them.
A lot of them are sold out. So
because a lot of those vendors, they just stuff lives on their website forever because they want the search clicks, and it's kind of a bummer. But
archival references.
The Mini KD7, at $439 is every bit as good a mic as the RAVO was, and it's less than half the price. And it does include a very nice shock mount, and it includes a pretty nice case too. So it's kind of a steal, especially considering that most mics in that sub $500 price point, and in fact, even a lot of mics under $1,000, like up to $1,000, a lot of condenser mics under $1,000 are made in China. And I don't have anything against things being made in China. The reality is almost everything that we consume, outside of food comes from China. Like most goods come from China because it's ridiculously still affordable for that to be true. But what we do see in the microphone world is that a lot of microphones that are made in China they have compromises in them that I'm not okay with. Because the only reason I got into this business was to try to make something better. And that ends up meaning that we refine the circuits relentlessly, and we listen to a bunch of components, and we pick the ones that work best for the sound we're trying to capture. And we do really high touch assembly, point-to-point wiring. There's really kind of no compromises anywhere inside the mic, and you can't do that with Chinese manufacturing. Or if you do, then chances are, 6 months later, some other company will have your microphone with their name on it.
So the Mini KD7 is entirely made in the U.S.?
Well, we import, the metalwork from overseas. I design the circuit boards, and I pick all the components, and we do all the soldering and assembly and testing and tuning in California. We burn the mics in Santa Rosa, California, after building them. So yeah, most anything else at that price point is basically shipped from Shanghai to the dealer. And in a lot of cases, and this really kind of this is frustrating for me, a lot of cases, even at higher price points, when you plug that mic in, you're the first person to hear it, which I think is it's just not okay. And it's certainly not true of anything I make. All the Roswell stuff, we build them, we listen to them, we do a frequency sweep analysis, we test for sensitivity, test for noise, test for distortion. And then Mini KD7s are all literally individually tuned. So there's some changes we make to the capsule and the circuit in order to achieve this, more or less flat frequency response. And when I say more or less, I mean within a dB or so. And so every mic that we build, we test it against the Gold Master. So the Gold Master is a mic that we built a couple of years ago, and it's like, okay, this is the model. This is what this model sounds like. Like this is what all Mini KD7s will sound like. And the reason we know that that's true is because we'll test the Gold Master, and then we'll test the new batch of Mini KD7s, and any that deviate in terms of sensitivity or frequency response, we'll tune, and we'll dial them in to match the Gold Master. And that's a level of quality that you're just not going to get anywhere else, frankly, even at twice the price.
I was going to say, that was when we were reviewing the Mini K87s before, I was just like, this mic should cost 2 or 3 times more than it does. Please don't increase the prices. But like you said, you don't see that level of like boutique quality assurance happening. And one thing that you hadn't commented is that since so many companies are using similar components, there's similar sounds for a lot of mics in we'll say the $150 to $300 range or the $500 range. And so not only do you have something that kind of sits above that, but you have the transparency and the neutrality we're looking for with a little bit of added character that actually does enhance the sound. So I'm just really impressed that you're able to put out a product of this quality at this price.
That's great. I appreciate that you say that. The pricing thing is deeply, deeply weird to me. I struggle when I see companies selling stuff for, $7.99, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, I could buy that. If I bought 500 of those, my price would be, $95. That's what they call the FOB price, freight on board. And so then you got to ship them and, from Shanghai, and then you got to pay some import fees, and, you could probably get them in your hands for $150 a piece. There's no way that's worth $700. It's just not However, if you tell a good marketing story, you can charge whatever you want. So, buyer beware. And that's kind of what Recording Hacks was about initially, trying to reveal what's inside each one so people can make an informed decision on the value of it. Yeah, what we found is that something that's missing from a lot of other microphones. I mean, we're definitely in this for the passion. Like this is not my first job. Like I left a career to do this because this is a lot more interesting. It's a lot more fun. I get a lot more joy out of doing this than what I was doing before. I made a lot more money than what I was doing before, but I don't regret the switch for a second. For me, what this is about is trying to make a superior product. And the deep irony for me is that I think everyone would have been happier if I would charge more. And I probably shouldn't talk about that, but the dealers would certainly be happy because I could offer dealers better margins. Because we kind of price these to sell direct, which is a very easy answer for it's like I'm not dumb. Like I have a mortgage, I've got cars to pay off, my kids in college. If I could make more money, I would make more money. But we price these to sell direct, and it's kind of because as a consumer, I hate overpaying. I hate the idea that I'm like there's this thing that I want, but for me to get this thing that I want, like I'm happy to pay the guy that made it. He deserves every penny, but I have to pay the store 30% or 50% too. Why? Because they have it on the shelf. And in the old bricks and mortar world, arguably that made more sense, right? Because they had to ship and, they have to pay for real estate and inventory
electricity
maintenance
and heat and air conditioning. Yeah.
All that stuff. And that's all, it's all legitimate expenses. And in those days too, dealers would educate people. Like they actually had a role to play. Now everything's online and dealers, in all industries, you just don't see that much anymore. Like they just want to make the sale. And we've had people approach us and say, will you drop ship for us? And I'm translating mentally. I'm like, okay, you're asking me to pay you a 30% commission for a product that I designed and manufactured and ship. And you get 30%. Why? Like, what's your value add? I really fail to see that. Anyway, the pricing thing is kind of strange. If we charged more, then all the people who said, hey, I really want your product, but I don't want to pay full price. Can I have a discount? It'd be so much easier if I just said, okay, well, the mic's $800, but you can have it for $439. That guy would be ecstatic. Now everyone gets it for $439, which pisses a lot of people off. I don't really understand the mentality, but that's the way the world seems to work. So.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, Matt, because that's actually one of the things that endears me to the company more than anything is that while I don't want to demean it by calling you the little guy, I'm definitely a champion of local businesses, American businesses. I'm not a jingoist by any means. My heritage is Italian and Spanish, but I am wearing a USA t-shirt right now, if you can see it on the camera. So Made in America means a great deal to me, and I think some of our listeners as well. And I'm so glad that you put that attention to detail in keeping it affordable for the everyday working person, because in the voiceover industry, that's who the majority of the actors are. They are everyday working people doing corporate scripts, doing IVR phone messages, doing e-learning, and that's how most of us make our money. I mean, there are those out there that are doing cartoons and animation and video games too, but the bread and butter is really sort of the working class VO, and that's how I've always approached the business. So I really appreciate that attitude.
Great. So in preparation for this, and I probably shouldn't have left this to the end of the podcast, so hopefully people have stuck with us. I actually put together a couple of tips for voice actors and people who like to record in general. So let me just spin through these in hopes that they're helpful to some people. This will be old news to some, but maybe not to some others. So I mentioned earlier the idea of auditioning mics at very low volume on playback so you can listen for that really sharp S sound. So that's one of them. Another one, I get this question all the time: what pop filter should I buy? And my answer is don't. And the reason is, you just spent $300, $500, $1,500 on a microphone. Why on earth would you put a screen in front of it? Like, don't pretend that doesn't have a sound. Instead, what I would suggest is that you position the microphone so that you don't need a pop filter. And so what I recommend is inverting the mic and putting the capsule at forehead height, angled away from you a little bit so that the grill of the mic is kind of pointing down at your mouth from above. And this does two or three things for you. primary benefit of this is that it gets the microphone's capsule, which is the thing behind the grill, it gets the capsule out of the blast radius of your mouth so that when you say P's and B's and T's and all these plosives, you're not blasting air at the capsule, which is what's going to cause that low frequency pop. That's what causes the mic to pop. So the capsule's up at your forehead and you're exhaling or popping below it, right? So you no longer need a pop filter, which means you're not making the mic sound dull and weird by putting a mesh, pantyhose or screen, whatever, in front of it. That's one benefit. Another benefit is, and this I learned from Randy Coppinger, who did voice recording at Disney for like 1 million games. He said that this position also records chest resonance, which you might not otherwise get as part of your sound. And this is something you can do right now with whatever mic you already have, right? Turn it upside down, if it isn't already. Raise it up above, like to your, so the grill's at forehead height, point it down kind of at your mouth and your chin, and see if it might just sound better. Like you've subtracted the pop filter and maybe you're getting more richer sound, like some chest sound out of it too. The next thing I was going to say is people ask me for preamp recommendations. And in general, the transducer, meaning the microphone, is a much, much bigger component of your sound than the preamp would be. The same is true of your home theater, right? If you change your speakers, which is the transducer, that's the thing that converts energy from one form to another, voltage to audio waves or vice versa, sound waves back to voltage. The transducer can really affect the sound going in or out in either direction. So if you go to your home theater and you change all your speakers, chances are you'll hear that. Your mom will hear that. And I say mom because moms are kind of traditionally the people who don't appreciate audio system upgrades. Clearly not always true, but there's kind of a story there. So if you change the speakers, that's something that almost everyone's going to notice. If you change the amp, is anyone going to notice? I mean, what's the amp's job? It's got to increase a signal level over a very wide bandwidth. If it doesn't do that, it's broken. Like if the amp sounds thinner or brighter, or it's got a weird mid-range hump, unless you've got EQ in there on purpose, an amp that does that would be broken. Or if it sounds distorted or something, that's bad, right? So basically, the table stakes for a stereo amplifier or a microphone preamp are, you need to make this thing louder without like screwing it up. And almost all preamps do a really fine job of that. Now, that's not to say you won't hear a difference, especially if you go out and spend a ton of money on something, but it's a subtle difference, right? It's a much more subtle difference than if you change the microphone. So the answer to the question, what preamp should I get? I would say use the one that is in your audio interface, the one that's built into your, your Volt or your SSL2 or your Apollo or, whatever, your Mackie, whatever it is. The preamp that's built in there is not the thing that's holding you back from getting voiceover gigs. The microphone might be. Like if your mic is really bright or sounds cloudy or muddy or whatever, that might hold you back. But any preamp is likely to work pretty well. So, yeah. So those are my tips for aspiring recordists.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the tips, Matt. This has been incredibly informative. Thank you for being our sponsor, and we hope to have you on the podcast again sometime.
I appreciate the opportunity, and best wishes to everyone. And I'll say just in closing, anyone who has questions about microphones, I'm pretty easy to find. RoswellProAudio.com. Send an email. My contact information is on the website, so if you need a recommendation, hit me up, and I will help as much as I can.
Matt, thanks again, and best of luck in the future with the company.
Right on. Thank you both.
How many times has this happened to you? You're listening to the radio when this commercial comes on, not unlike this one, and this guy starts talking, not unlike myself.
Or maybe it's a woman that starts talking, not unlike myself, and you think to yourself, geez, I could do that.
Well, mister, well, missy, you just got one step closer to realizing your dream as a voiceover artist, because now there's Global Voice Acting Academy. All the tools and straight from the hip, honest information you need to get on a fast track to doing this commercial yourself.
Well, not this one exactly.
Classes, private coaching, webinars, home studio setup, marketing and branding help, members-only benefits like workouts, rate and negotiation advice, practice scripts, and more. All without the kind of hype you're listening to right now. Go ahead, take our jobs from us. We dare you.
Speak for yourself, buddy. I like what I do.
And you will too when you're learning your craft at Global Voice Acting Academy. Find us at globalvoiceacademy.com.
Because you like to have fun.
So thanks to Matt for coming on the show. I really actually enjoyed the video. We left the video on while we were talking, so because I hadn't met Matt in person and was able to at least see him on Zoom. That was cool to be able to see his face and match the face to the name. Really appreciate Roswell coming on board and also providing the mini K87 mic, which I'm still using and I've used for everything. And the thing just sings, man. I created a demo last week I shared with Sean, and I just love the way it sounds in pretty much every mix.
I think it's the best sounding mic for your voice that you've used yet, so congrats on that.
Thank you. I tend to agree.
And actually, speaking of, if you guys are going to be at One Voice Conference in a couple of months, Matt has let me use my review unit as a donation piece for the month or the annual raffle that happens at the end of the conference. So, if you like the sound of the mic, either that you heard on the interview or in our previous episode where we tested it out, then you can win your own. So, but you got to be at the conference to find out how. So, hopefully that wets your whistle and you'll see you there.
So that wraps up this episode of the VO Meter.
Measuring your voiceover progress.
We don't have any guests scheduled right now, but we'd love to have some. So if you're interested in being a guest on the show, please email us or contact us on Facebook or Instagram or X and let us know you'd like to be on the show. And please come see us at One Voice. We're not doing anything podcast related, but you can tell us how much you love us and talk to the GVA table or come see me at my presentation.
Awesome. Thanks so much. That's all for this one. You'll hear us in the next one. Bye, guys. Thanks for listening to this episode of the VO Meter. To follow along, visit us at www.vometer.com.
We'd also love to hear your comments or suggestions for the show. Or if you have a questionable gear purchase, tell us all about it on our Facebook page or on Twitter at the VO Meter.